Okay, this is the first video in a series, a short series that I want to do on trying to develop some understanding of DeMoivre's theorem. All right, so here we go. Now, the first thing we have to consider before we can jump right into that is we have to have some insight into what multiplication actually is, how to interpret it. All right, so I don't want to say that you were lied to when you were little, but you weren't told the whole story. So let's have a look at this. So imagine the number 3. So I'll write that here, okay? Now I want you to think of the number 3 as basically like on a number line, you can draw an arrow that points from 0 to the right. It points, the arrow has a length of 3. Now remember, the arrow is not tilted up and the arrow is not tilted down. It's just pointed to the right, okay? And we call that number 3. Now, when I take 3 and I multiply that by -1, I have no doubt that everybody listening knows that the answer to that is -3. But let's look at the interpretation of that. What really just happened is you took this arrow, which was centered at 0 and it pointed over at a length of 3, and you rotated it around 180 degrees, and then you wound up with a left-hand pointed arrow that was 3 units long. And that's what we call -3, okay? Now, if you take -3 and you multiply that by -1, it's essentially like you're taking that now blue arrow that I have up there and you're doing another rotation of 180 degrees, and that rotates it back to the right, and you end up getting +3. So now what we've kind of established is when you multiply something by -1, you rotate it 180 degrees. So multiplication of a negative times a negative is just two 180-degree rotations right back to being positive. Now the best way to do that is to say this. The number like 3. A better way to write that is to say it's 3, designating its length, at an angle of 0. Okay? Now, if I wanted to talk about -3, a better way to write that would be to say it's 3 because it's still 3 units long, but it would be at an angle of 180. So this is going to be the notation, and I think after we look at this, the pattern is going to become clear. All right? Now, look at this chart. What I want you to do is pause the video and fill this in with my new notations. Okay, now look what we have. When I filled this in for the first one, I had 2 at an angle of 0 times 3 at an angle of 0, and we know that that was equal to 6 at an angle of 0. Okay, so those are two positive numbers. Then the other rule, negative times a positive is a negative. Well, if you look at this, I've got 2 at an angle, I've got all these things right here, okay? But if you notice, in all cases, I'm multiplying the lengths, 2 times 3, always gets me 6, all right? But what are you doing with the angles? Are you multiplying them? No, you're adding them. So I'm going to stop the video here and let's make a note for part 1. How do you multiply two numbers? You multiply their lengths, which is always positive, and you add their angles. Look out for video number 2.